attending is called You Are Not Alone. It's an event on how we can and why we must fight tuition at OSU. So ASAP is a student activist group here on campus, and we orient ourselves on the radical left. We operate by consensus and horizontal politics. What that means is that we don't have an official president or secretary or any titled leaders, but instead what we try to do is cultivate a group of leadership where everybody has equal participation and say in the decisions that are made as a group. This isn't a perfect model of organizing, but this is one that we strive for because we believe in deep democracy instead of representative democracy. The initiatives that ASAP has been a part of, among other things, have been teach-ins on prison industrial complex, Palestinian solidarity. We've also done teach-ins on abolishing student debts and lowering tuition, and that's another one today that you'll be participating in. And today we're really going to focus in on that issue of rising tuition, the corporatization of the university, and what we can do as a group to fight against it. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Yeah. So my name is Isamar Chavez, and I am, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a third-year student. I am a double major in liberal studies and education with a minor in peace studies, focused around like political science, sociology, history, and all that. Yeah, Azim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Azim Husseini. I'm a junior at Oregon State. I'm currently in the biohealth sciences program, but I think I'll be making a major change this summer.
And my name is Alex Riccio. I prefer pronouns he, him. And my major is in graduate studies, interdisciplinary studies, with a primary focus in ethnic studies. I'll be here for another year, probably.
And so, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for making the time to be here. And a reason, I'm just probably ask the question of why did we create this event? And so raise your hand if you or someone you know is being affected by raising the costs of public education. All right, so one of the first couple of five reasons of why we kind of organize this is to make the strong claim and remain strong in the belief that students are more than just customers. And second, share the information of the state's role in public education and share and discuss Dr. Howard Bunce's report, who is a professor of accounting from University of Eastern Michigan.
Yeah.
And discuss about the financial health of OSU and find out where tuition is going, where is it not. And after that, we'll have a Q&A discussion to really build answers as to how we really can effectively organize if this is something that we care about. And so this video that I'm about to show has a pretty good layout of what we'll be talking about in summary. So if it doesn't work, let's see. It's like loading.
Ever notice that your parents didn't have as much student debt as you?
Sorry if you can't hear
Because they
that.
did. Since 1978, the cost of college has increased by 1,225%. So what happened? When your parents went to college in the 1970s, states covered 75% of the cost of public college. Today, states no longer are investing in higher education. Between 1991 and 2010, state funding per full-time student dropped by 26.1%. By 2012, public colleges received more money from students than it did from states. The government basically shifted the cost of education to students and their families. The other problem is administrative bloat. The number of non-teaching staff members at colleges has more than doubled in the last 25 years, and those staffers are expensive. Finally, there's an amenities arms race. To compete for the best students and the most applicants, American colleges are adding luxuries as if they're upscale resorts. Opulent dorms, pools with spas and lazy rivers, palatial sports facilities. The construction costs have increased exponentially since 1995. So between states funding less, administrative bloat, and luxury amenities, it's no surprise that you're paying more for college these days. We need to start viewing college as a public good again, like roads and airports, not as a private country club experience. Share this video invest in higher education.
So it's kind of like creative in a certain way, and I thought it was a very good like consensus of like
Ever notice that
researching.
your parents didn't have as much student debt as you?
Okay. Excellent. All right. All right. So a little bit just to kind of break this down. So we'll go over the brief history of the state of Oregon's view on education and the current state funding of higher education. And then we'll break it down to the Howard Bunce's report and kind of what the university's funding trends are, and then the call to action in the dialogue, just to provide that structure. So this is the OSU mission statement, and I want some of us to kind of think about what the university is kind of proclaiming that it's focusing on. So as a land-grant institution committed to teaching, research, and outreach and engagement, Oregon State University promotes economic, social, cultural, and environmental progress for the people of Oregon, the nation, and the world. The mission is achieved by producing graduates competitive in the global economy, supporting continuous search for new knowledge and solutions, and maintaining a rigorous focus on academic excellence, particularly in the 3 signature areas: advancing the science of sustainable earth and ecosystems, improving human health and wellness, and promoting economic growth and social progress. And this is founded by this is on the Board of Trustees website. So a little bit about the history of education. I wanted to kind of figure out like what has Oregon's position been around education, and this is just something that I've come across, and I didn't even know about this, but a paper that Danny Schumann, the author of the creation of the Oregon Constitution, he made the argument that education in like Oregon was kind of founded on 2 ideologies. Of course, this is not limiting to just these, but education has the state limits on state spending and different forms of racial exclusion. And I don't know if you can see this source, but this is all on the Oregon government website. So the paper highlights some important things about what ideology around public education has been. And so just to expand on that, so the debates around education revealed a few general characteristics about the state constitutional convention. So the delegates favored a solid fund to pay for a basic system of common schools, whether that be public schools. And when it came to higher education, there was like this question of like, well, who do we really want to control the university? Should it even be made public or should it be privatized? So that has been an ongoing debate. The 4th point is that the common fund would base the sale of public land as well as other money that accrued from state revenue. And the interest of other revenues from the fund would be distributed throughout school districts around the state. And so after that, there has been not much debate with that foundation of like upbringing. So it's interesting. I got this, previously I've been involved with ASOSU, and they are kind of mentored and provided information by the Oregon Student Association. And it was mentioned that after, I don't know if you remember from the video, it said that after 1991, we really started to see a steep decline in state budgeting for education. Well, it's interesting because it could be argued that this ballot measure kind of changed the way institutions funded for public education. And so ballot measure 5 was proposed, and it asked, shall the Constitution set limits on property taxes and dedicate these funds to public education and non-governmental operations? So we had like 2 different aisles. And so like before 1990, education was traditionally funded by a portion relying on property taxes and real estate revenues. And after the ballot measure was passed, it kind of made a decision, we can no longer rely on property taxes, and so we have to pull from the general fund. And it kind of, that forced alternative ways to think about funding education. And I found this, I was looking through the Oregon Oregon Encyclopedia, and I found this one really interesting. There was like different letters of arguments for the ballot measure, arguments against, and I found this piece really interesting. Underneath the common sense thing, it said that children's services, healthcare programs, universities, prisons, and other programs that receive state funds would suffer from severe cutbacks. And so I just found that really interesting. I didn't know about that, and so I think that's just something kind of interesting that kind of provides some information about like now. So who's the top dog of kind of administrating universities? And so the HEC, it's the Higher Education Coordinating Committee. They were established in 2011, and it is a 14-member volunteer, and they're the ones of kind of influencing the Oregon legislature, the governor, and the chief executive officer. Of course, there's like a lot of power differences, but in specific to higher education, the HEC is a very important power structure and institution that kind of helps with doing some of the following. So they help and develop a biennial budget, which that means like 2 years, a cycle of 2 years, and they make recommendations on the funds for public schools and secondary education and institutions. And they also make decisions on where those funds go and how much. They work with legislature. They also work with approving academic programs for public institutions and allocating Oregon Opportunity Grants. So if you, like for me, for example, I am an Oregon Opportunity Grant recipient, and so if you fall under that category, they kind of help with that. And they also help with licensing private career and trade schools, overseeing programs for veterans, and implementing other legislative directives. And so, who sets the tuition here at OSU?
Do you know without looking?
The Board of Trustees. So we have the HEC, and then we have the Board of Trustees at different, we have 7 public universities, and then I believe 17 community colleges throughout the state. So the HEC and the Board of Trustees at different universities. And so we'll kind of be transitioning now to the report. And so keep in mind that this is not like our work. This is the work from an intellectual, a scholar by Howard Bunzes. And so we'll be trying to make this as more sense as we go. And so some of his report findings was that the state of Oregon and the state appropriation, which is like state funding, in the future looks very good. He found that the ratio analysis and bond ratings of OSU are all solid and around. And then this part right here, the priorities of OSU instruction versus administration. That's key. And yeah, so we'll be kind of going around there. But I found this one really interesting. Most of the revenue that OSU makes is out of tuition. 27% helps kind of run the institution. And then we have the grants, the state funding, we have auxiliaries, and then non-operation revenues, I don't know what that means, but then capital grants, gifts, and other revenues. So again, keep this in mind. And I think I'll pass it on to Azim.
Again, my name is Azim, and I'll be discussing the trends in tuition and student aid. I'll also examine the trends in faculty and administrative pay, and then I'll finish with athletics. And again, I'll state it again. This is most of the slides come from Dr. Howard Bunzes, and he's an accounting professor at Eastern Michigan University. And he came to Oregon State, I believe, in February or March, and he broke down OSU's budget. That's what he specializes in analyzing budgets, university budgets. So most of these slides are from This is kind of relevant, but not really. I just feel I also say this at the beginning of a lecture. President Obama makes $400,000 a year. President Ed Ray makes almost $700,000 a year. So you have the president of a public institution for higher education making almost $300,000 more than the President of the United States. To me, that just seems wrong. But, okay, back to the Bunce's report. So this graph illustrates how, I think there's like a little bit of a myth, at least for Oregon, that there's not enough state appropriation, not a lot of money gets pumped into Oregon State. But as you can see by the graph, it's remained relatively steady. It took a little dip in 2012, but it rebounded really nicely. But obviously tuition increase has stayed increased. And this graph illustrates, pretty self-explanatory, but there was a 79% increase from 2007 to 2016. And just this past year, with the increase in tuition this past year, OSU now beats U of O as the highest tuition level in the state of Oregon. So at least we beat U of O at something, right? And so this is OSU compared to its peers for tuition. It's not really fair to compare OSU to public schools in Oregon because we're so much bigger. So it's better to compare against Colorado State, Arizona, North Carolina State, Michigan State, Davis, Iowa State, and Purdue, because the metrics line up better, like in terms of appropriation, population, and things like that. So compared to our peers, we have a 42% increase in tuition. And this is just in detail for the years. So according to College Board, from 2014 to 2015, national public universities increased their tuition by average of 2.9%, but in that same time frame, Oregon State increased their tuition at 9.6%. So we are so far above the average in 2014 and 2015. And from 2015 to 2016, we increased it another 10.6%. The numbers aren't out yet for the national averages, but I'm just guessing that it's not as high as 10.6%. So logically, you'd assume that they're increasing tuition so they would relieve students and provide more aid, but that's not the case. In 2013, the student aid or discounting was at 21.2%, and at 2015, it decreased to 17.9%. And by student discounting, I mean, let's say you have a football player, he comes to Corvallis, he gets a 100% break off of his tuition. And let's say you have another individual from a high income family, he gets zero break, or he or she gets zero break off on their tuition. So somebody in between a football player and a high income individual, so let's say like a low income student or a student that has a really high SAT score or specialized in a specific field, that break that student is getting is decreasing. And this is Oregon State. This is not the state of Oregon. This is not the federal government. Oregon State is pulling back its scholarships. Next, I'll talk about the instruction pay and institutional support pay. Instruction pay are the people in the classrooms, specifically, and institutional support are the upper level administrators. Highlighted in yellow is the instruction pay or the teacher salaries, and that it fell from $243 million to $239 million. And upper level administration pay, highlighted in green, went from $61 million to $65 million. So it's hidden in plain sight. It's taking $4 million from teacher pay and basically redistributing that to upper level administration pay. And this is just the percentage change. So again, upper level administration up the highest at 6%. Instruction pay went down by 1.6%. And all the way at the bottom, student aid is at 6.6%. Even though tuition has steadily raised, our aid is still pulled back. And this is the pure instruction and research expense data, percentage-wise. So OSU is in the bottom 3 compared to its peers. The pure average for expense is 31.5%. OSU is at 28.9%. That equates to about So they're $25 million below the average spending on instruction. And also research, we're touted as this great research university, but we're still 0.5% below the average. And that may not seem like a lot, but that's a difference of $4 million. So in total, we're $29 million behind the average for OSU's peers on instruction and research expense. However, for institutional support, we're top 3. The peer average is 6.4%. OSU is at 7.3, which may not seem like a lot again, but that's a difference between $8.4 million. So just to recap the 2 slides, OSU is behind $29.3 million on instruction and research, but for upper level administration, they are outpacing their peer average by $8 million. And these are the top OSU admin salaries. I believe 6 of the top 10 are from athletics. So we have we have 38 upper level administrators making over $200,000 each, and an additional 62 upper level administrators making between $150,000 to $200,000 each. So they're getting paid really well, obviously. So how are the professors doing? OSU was at the bottom for its salary for full professors. They're 11.4 percentage points behind their peers. For associates, they're 2.1% behind their peers, and for assistants, they're right at the average. And this is President Ed Ray's cabinet. As you can see, there are only, I believe, 3 academic voices in his cabinet. The rest are all upper level administrators. So you can see where the influence is. His cabinet is mostly upper level admin, so they're gonna do what's in their best interest. Next, I'll finish up with athletics. So a little less than 3% of the student body at Oregon State are student athletes. So it's really a small percentage. However, 7.7% of total OSU expenses go toward athletics. From 2010 to 2015, there was a 48.1% increase in athletic expenses, and in that same time frame, all the other expenses only went up 34.4%. And this is a dollar and percentage change in coaches and faculty salaries. So from 2010 to 2015, men's head coaches' salaries went up 40%, which equates to about $160,000. And comparatively, instructors went up 7%, which equates to only about $2,000. So the individual making the highest amount of money got the biggest pay rate, while the teachers didn't. And this graph looks very confusing, but in the yellow is what students pay for. So from 2007 to 2014, the total subsidy for athletics was $107 million, which averages about to an annual subsidy of $13.4 million. And by subsidy, I mean it's our student dollars, it's our money getting pumped into athletics. In 2014, we subsidized 19.4% of our athletics, which means almost 20% of the athletics, of the cost for athletics were on us. And we have no say in this. We have to pump money into athletics whether we attend the games or not. And I don't think that's fair. In terms of the Pac-12, we obviously have the highest subsidy rate. The average for the Pac-12 is $7 million, but we subsidize athletics we subsidize athletics at $12 million. And this doesn't include Stanford or USC because they're both private institutions. So, in closing, the power and decision making are at the top. We can clearly see who's benefiting from these increases in tuition, and it's definitely not the students or the instructors. The people who make these decisions, the upper level administrators, Most of them don't even live in Corvallis, so they're not involved in like the day-to-day happenings on campus or in the community. So I believe we need to have more student voices and more academic voices in the board and have more influence on these decisions because we live with them every day and they do.
Okay, so we should just breathe a little because this is all really grim, right? I mean, what we see is a problem with power. The power is entirely concentrated at the top at this university. There is no power that students currently possess to counter the decisions made by the Board of Trustees. We have things like formal representative bodies like the ASOSU, but they don't really have all that much power to influence and sway things like the Board of Trustees, the foundation on their investment dollars. They're not an agitational force. ASOSU is entirely dependent upon the funding money that they get from the university. They're entirely dependent on maintaining a valid and legitimate position of authority as student representatives, so they're not going to do anything to really contest and challenge the power of this university. So there's a number of proposed ideas and solutions that we can come up with for what we should do. But I don't think we should be firm in these ideas. I think collectively we can come together and kind of think about them. But some basic ideas, one of them is that we could actually restructure the Board of Trustees. So the Board of Trustees right now has one seat for students, and that seat is selected by the board. It's supposed to be selected by the governor, but the way that it actually works in process is that President Ed Ray writes to the governor who he wants to be on the Board of Trustees, and the governor says, okay. So our president basically sets the Board of Trustees, who then go on to set tuition dollars and make decisions about these things. We could expand that representative voice on the Board of Trustees. Even at 2 seats is better than 1. And we could also make that seat not specifically in the domain of President Ed Ray or the governor to decide, but we can decide on that. This is just one idea. We could also include more seats for staff and faculty as well, because there's also 1 seat for staff, that's correct. The representative is SEIU representative. And I think there's a couple of seats for faculty. We could also include ourselves in the decision-making process of the budget. The budget is kind of like a document that sets the agenda. It's not necessarily followed, but setting that agenda is really important. And there's models for how you can set an agenda that are more participatory. And one of them is called participatory budgeting. What it means is that you don't allow a small concentrated group of people to decide what the budget looks like alone and exclusively. What you do is you have a broad plurality of people. Here that would mean students, faculty, and staff that would all participate in the decision making, how the budget looks and where the dollars should go, and then try to implement that. We could also redirect investments that the foundation has into things like subsidized housing. Housing is such a big problem here in Corvallis and on campus. There's a lack of student housing. They have to expand more, and what they're doing is they're expanding into luxury apartments. Who needs luxury apartments? This is not a resort. We're supposed to be here to learn, to grow as people, to educate ourselves, and to participate in a community environment. We don't need big spas and rivers of pools in our apartment complexes, but that's what they're expanding into. Things like the retreat. What's the other one called? Isn't it called the luxury or something ridiculous like that? These are the contracts that the university has made for expanding housing options. But instead, they could actually be just building things, very traditional things, like dorms that are subsidized for low-income people or incoming students. They can make these things more affordable, and they could also bring back cooperative housing. We used to have cooperatives on campus. We got rid of all of them, slowly and surely. And about 4 years ago, I think it was, we had 4 left, and they all got shut down. So why don't we have those cooperatives anymore? Why can't we get them back? We can also bring tuition levels back to the number that it was in 2007. Because we see that the state appropriation and the state funding in 2007 is actually right parallel with how it is now. Yet the tuition has exploded almost 80%. So we can readjust those tuition dollars, set it at that level that it was before and cap it, and then from there work at the state level Because the problem that we face as a university is that the university wants to always pass the blame to the state. They're going to say all times, if you bring up these issues of tuition, they're going to say, well, that's the state. The state doesn't give us enough money. We're poor. We don't have any money. Like, we have to increase your tuition because there's just not enough coming in. There's not enough revenue. That's completely untrue. We see it with the slides that Howard Bunces says. Actually, Ed Ray's own testimony in the past 3 years has stated that the fiscal health of the university is strong. So even the president of this university is contradicting the claim that the state funding is the source of the problem. State funding is great. Like, we definitely need more state funding if we want things like free tuition. But that may be not in the auspice of the university here, but it is in the power of the university to lower tuition and to lower it drastically. There's no reason that they can validly claim there isn't. So what we need to think about is, how do we start a movement here on campus? If anybody tells you to go register to vote and to go vote for the right politician to get in office, they're telling you don't start a movement. Because that's not what movements are. Movements are not a reliance on electoral politics and gradual gradational changes in the governing structure at the top. What we need is power now. We need it at the bottom. We need it immediately, and we need to implement it in every space that we possibly can. And it needs to start here at Oregon State. Because you can go to the state all you want, but that is a whole project that's going to take years and years and energy and money and money. Things that we don't have. But what we have is our bodies. We are here. We're here right now. This is our backyard, and we can start doing things in our own backyard to make this a better place. There's lots of tactics that people have employed in the past to change things right in their own local arena, in their own local territory. And there are things that students have done. Actually, just recently, one thing that students did in San Francisco was they went on a hunger strike. You know, I'm going to suggest some tactics here, and they're going to be radical. I'm not saying that everybody should adopt all of these. There's definitely zones of comfort that everybody can come at. But these are available tactics. Hunger strikes. The San Francisco State University Ethnic Studies Department went on hunger strike. I think only like a few of them, not that many. After 10 days, they won their demands. They got funding from the university to keep the Ethnic Studies program alive, and actually got more money than they had before. So that's one tactic. There's teach-ins. Now this is called a teach-in, but this is not a real teach-in. Teach-ins started probably in the 60s with all the student activism and radical activism going around. And what they used to do is they would take a space and they would stay there. They would talk about whatever controversial topic they had. They would occupy that space. You would be teaching all night long and into the morning. You would just not, you wouldn't leave. Like, this is ours. We're going to educate ourselves and we're going to get it right until we're done. That was what a teach-in was. You teach in. You stayed there. That also brings us to occupations. We can occupy spaces on campus. We can occupy the administration. That's definitely what they don't want us to do, but it can be done. And it has been done in other places. There's another thing that I think we really need to think about as a tactic, and that is creating a new source of representative power on campus. Right now, the source of representation for students is ASOSU, but that doesn't have to be the source of representation. We can have more than just one. We could have more than one that is in cahoots with the administration. In the University of Missouri, right, just recently, they created a new student government, and it was made up of cultural groups, it was made up of labor unions, faculty unions, staff unions. It was made up of various student activist groups, and they were the new government. They said, we reject the student government now. We are representing ourselves. So we don't have to be represented by some elect people, where the elect people here are mostly fraternity people that have lots of money to run for office. We don't need that. We're our own representatives. We're our own voices. We can create a coalition here that can represent us and what we want. And there are models already in existence here that are starting to do that. One of them is called the Alliance for a Socially Just University. This alliance, this coalition force, was created about a year ago after a teach-in, but again, not a real teach-in. It was just a lecture. And it was a member group of MECHA de OSU, of ASAP, Allied Students for Another Politics. It was the SCIU, the Staff Representative Union. It was the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors. and CGE, the Coalition of Graduate Employees. So we had student union, we had student activists, we had other student activists, and we had teachers and staff unions, all coming together saying we agree on a common cause, and we're going to work together in collaboration on that cause. Well, this could be a model that we inject some power into, and we really use it as an opportunity to challenge the governing structure of Oregon State. We should reject ASOSU as our representatives, not because ASOSU is bad, but because ASOSU is a limited source of power. What ASOSU needs is a countervailing source of power to make them have more authority and more ability to actually maneuver the university and attract them to their cause. So the way that I like to think about it is ASOSU can be MLK and we can be Malcolm X. You know, the agitational force needs to be there. But you need the kind of person that makes it look good and like, hey, we're willing to work with you and compromise and bullshit, whatever. But then you also need the person that says, no, we are militant, we are radical, we will never compromise. We will always ask for what we want. Don't raise your hand yet. And that will allow for a multiplicity of power. So you can still have those agencies that compromise, negotiate, sit at the table, but you need people barking at the door to make sure that they know that if you don't compromise and make these reasonable reforms, you're going to be steamrolled down by this movement that's just coming through and they're demanding everything. So that's what we need here. I don't think I need to go over too many more tactics, but there's lots more. What I think right now is we should kind of come together and start thinking about collectively what are the strategies that we want, what are the tactics that we can employ, and how can we actually make this happen? So I saw you had a hand up and you had a hand up, but I don't want people raising hands. What I want is us to talk to each other. Let's look at each other, let's get together, like we're all people here. You're not gonna raise your hand and ask the teacher to call on you. Let's just talk.
As a disclaimer, I'm part of Allied Students for Another Politics, and I don't support electoral politics, so Sammy, I'm sorry, but if you're here to campaign for your campaign, then I don't know if this is...
I am here for some other reason. May I speak for that? Let me see. I'm not MLK, but in the analogy or the metaphor you used, I am here coming to really educate myself on it. I really appreciate the presentation and very, very informative and brief but rich information about what's the status. I feel you, I understand you. Why I'm here is not the November election. I would disagree that the change will take years if we want to change the state. I believe personally, because I'm doing my own campaign, that I could be representing you. So whenever our representative gets asked about a student debt, rather than they will respond to you, we will promise you good interest rates on your mortgage, there will be a student who knows what you go through and will understand you and will not bounce back with another measure that's totally unrelated. That's not why I'm here. After 30 minutes, or maybe 15 minutes, right now, the House of Representatives of ASOSU is going to vote on a bill that will change the structure of SIFC from a budget setting and a budget determination committee as independent committee into an advisory committee, which means all the stuff that we have been talking about from the fees side, not the tuition side, is going to change. Those who we elected as SIFC members are not going to have a voice anymore. Maybe I believe we have to make a change. Without MLK, we couldn't make a change. Without Malcolm X, we couldn't make a change. I'm going downstairs right now to say, no, there's people who are telling you you are doing it wrong, getting the power out of the SIFC, getting the power out of the students, groups like you, is not true, it's not okay. What I heard from other representatives, they're not here. They're not represented. They're not running. And I understand your frustration of anyone who would represent the power of being represented through the structure. They don't listen. I am here just to tell you, I'm listening to you. I hope that you can come downstairs, and I'm okay with this. You can call me on video. Come and occupy. Tell them, ASOSU, we don't feel you are legitimate. But until then, in 15 minutes, I will be the only voice I know of who's publicly saying I'm opposed to the structural change of power, where it is very concentrated with one or two people, and we're taking it as much as possible from the people. So but that's why I wanted just to not fire back, but say you had really not that right assumption why I'm here. So that being said, I really appreciate you all. Take all the time you need, but I assume after 15 minutes they will start reading the bill in the journey room. Please be there, listen, see what they say. You can wait and raise your hand. I'll give you my time through a structural way, and you can talk for 2 minutes. If you want to speak up the way that you want, you are more than welcome. We want you inside the room. Until then, I'll talk about those who are not in the room, and I'll convey your voice. Thank you very much. I'm going now because I have commitments, not as being frustrated at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for it. Yeah, that's
So, and it's great to have that kind of internal group of people trying to work to make ASOSU better. But the problem is that ASOSU is already working on a bill to make things worse. Why is that? This is the problem with electoral politics.
Exactly.
ASOSU is not even that powerful. And they're already doing all these weird like maneuvers for power grabbing over the incidental fees. Like what the fuck? That is insane. Like they are already greedy for power. This is what it looks like from the inside. It's good to have people from the inside trying to like battle it down, but you're fighting a losing battle. The other thing about ASOSU is the representative from ASOSU that sits on the seat of the Board of Trustees voted to increase your tuition. And he's your vice president.
Yeah, I was going to say that he's vice president now. And actually, on the representatives next year. So
you can beat your head against the wall all you want, hoping that one day electoral politics is going to work out better for you. But in the meantime, what I suggest you do is think really hard about what we can actually do outside of that domain. What can we do now? What can we do here?
I think what we could do now and what we could do here is from the outside penetrate inside. Because right now, as much as people don't like electoral politics in this room, the opportunity has presented itself for this huge group, not huge, but this decent-sized group to get up and go downstairs and be annoying. And that's probably, honestly, that's kind of probably something we need to do. And I think that we should probably go down right now if everybody else is willing to. I know
What are they going
it's
to vote
working
on?
in the system. He was explaining that the SCF, the Student Incidental Fee Committee, who's in charge of upwards of $4 million of our student fees, decides like where all of this is going. They're going to be restructured from actually coordinating where that money goes to just being an advisory committee. So I think that the small amount of power that the SIC, whatever, the small amount of power that they do have is going to be taken away. And though they're part of ASOSU and not very powerful, it's still something that students in general have some sort of say over.
These are things in the past, like the student fees are separate for those of you, does everybody know student fees and the separateness of tuition here? So then there's tuition is what you're paying for classes, and the student fees are things like the CAPS, the Counseling and Psychological Services, the things like the Dixon Rec Center, the Student Experience Center, the health, Student Health Center over wherever that is. So what used to happen is that this SIFC would have like an open house that was not very well advertised, of course, because what is about decisions here. But you could go in as a student and actually potentially influence the decisions being made. And what I think Sammy just said was that they're going to take that away. So there is a board actually like, oh, we're going to have the sports side of the student fees be increased. We're going to have the CAP side be increased. We're going to start increasing more tuition or student fees for these things. So I think that's what they're talking about. But if they're changing that now, that means that they're going to let that probably means that student fees are going to run rampant in the future, and the things that they're going to be allocated to are going to change.
And the small amount of students who do have any say over that are going to lose that say.
But
Though they are more well-off students and not exactly working with us, they're still students, and there's still like a small say that we're still connected to them. They're still part of our group. So, I don't
Right,
know.
but the question that I have is that what next? You know, I agree that maybe in the immediate sense right now, we need to do something to confront, you know, ASOSU and say like, hey, don't change this decision internally. But that's not a strategy. Like, we need a strategy that's long-term. Like, what after this one protest? You know, like, can't just march, can't just picket. You actually need to think about a strategy. Like, what next? You know, I think it is important probably to protest the decision made by ASOSU and to not allow the bill to go through. But there are already people that are doing that, and that's planned. But what after that? Like, what's the step after? We always have to be thinking in multiple steps, like 10 steps ahead, not just this immediate right now, because then you're just responding to crisis after crisis after crisis. You're always on your heels instead of on your toes. It's like, how do we get off of our backs? That's what I think we should think about.
Can we meet again for that purpose?
Sure.
I mean, and can we be in touch by email or some?
We have some sign-in sheets there, and if, I don't know, if people feel really passionate and want to go, like, that's totally fine, like, I'll go too. But if people want to stay, I don't know, how is everyone feeling in the room? Like, you know?
Temperature check.
Yeah. So this is one of, like, this is kind of how, like, the group works. We want, like, everybody's input. So, you know, what are you guys thinking? How do you feel about?
You know, let's practice consensus. ASAP makes decisions by consensus. If we propose the decision, like hypothetically, or wait, let's use the decision. Go down to the ASOSU and protest this bill. Everybody's in agreement. You put up your fist. If you are in agreement, but you don't think that we're quite there yet, and you want to discuss it a little bit more, you put up one finger. If you're still in agreement and you have a couple of things you want to say, you put up two. If you're not in agreement and you want to talk about it, you put up 3 or more fingers. 5 is like, absolutely right now, let me talk. So who wants to do this? Let's put the decision to consensus. Who wants to go up or down, whatever it is, to ASOSU and protest this decision? Consensus. Is that 3 fingers?
Yeah, sorry.
There's a few people that do. So since this is consensus, there's also the opportunity, if you want, to take your decision and go with it. You don't have to, you know, be constrained by the decision of the group. People that decided they don't want to go with it, I encourage you to stay here and talk this through. And the people that do want to go, there's no shame in that. There's no judgment. But you're passionate about it. I think I don't know when the bill is going to be voted on, but you should go. Yeah. And if you want to, or I mean, I don't know in how many minutes, but if you want to like sign our sign-up sheet and we can contact you in the future and you can still communicate with us, that's great too. So that's consensus. But you're still sitting here, so I don't know if you're totally
Is that our
confident.
cue to get up and
Because yeah, we should definitely talk about strategy. But let's go. Let's go represent. What are we waiting for?
Strategies and there's tactics. Tactics are more immediate, and if more of us go, this tactic will be a lot more effective and benefit the strategy. But if only like 3 people go, then it's like, why should they
It's
listen
3
to
more people than they were expecting to show up.
It is,
That's-
but if all of us go, there's what, 6, 9, way more people.
But I can also see the advantage of capitalizing on the fact that we're all in this room right now to have this discussion about a longer term strategy rather than, like Alex was saying, putting out this immediate fire, which obviously is important and is right in front of us, but it's part of like a bigger fire.
Right.
And the
So-
thing that we're protesting is like, we're gonna go protest a body that we don't care about. Like, we are trying to like, this,
Maybe
the
not
long,
everyone.
well, I mean, the long-term strategy is to replace or to like counter. So, I mean, this is like, it's an important decision to be made, but I guess what I'm saying with the long-term strategy is like a complete disregard of like their authority. Am I wrong?
I think, kind of building off what you mentioned with the which school you said, but when they established their own kind of student organization. I don't know, I think that what would be beneficial is, yes, stopping this bill would be beneficial, but in a long-term scheme of things, either causing disruption or crisis within ASOSU itself and forcing them to, address the rest of the student body the way they ought to would be one way, but again, establishing and having them be willing to identify another organization that is also in the interest of students, I think would be beneficial as well. And I think, creating that crisis to get that attention and to force people who are in this power, such as the president or president of ASOSU, to have these conversations is crucial.
Something that I think I'd like to add too is like, for me, like I don't think that ASOSU necessarily is like the root of the problem, like kind of mentioned before, like they're just students, and they're not like the main, they're part, but they're not like the main of like why students are facing an economic burden, and so, I don't know, that's something I'm thinking about, but yeah.
Well, also I wanted to know from you, because you have some insight into ASOSU, how capable do you think people would be to actually bore from within and like kind of become insiders and then create a crisis like Justin's talking about?
I mean, well, I think that there's some individuals in there, but when you're a student and you're constantly addressing issues around trying to create a more equitable and more just university, you keep running into walls. And it makes it really difficult to really have student voice. And so when we talk about what does really student voice mean? What does really student engagement mean? Does it just mean like empty activism or just empty like representation? Of kind of being kind of manipulated by like administration or other higher power structures that kind of influence and kind of create this division between students. I think that's like one of the big obstacles that we have, and I think maybe perhaps ASOSU is not like the sole target. We could try our best to utilize and negotiate, but as mentioned, we need both. We need multiple, and maybe perhaps they do need a push. Be like, hey, look, you say you're for student representation, you say you're for student voice, but what are you really doing? Are you listening to us? And I think there can be both avenues for that. And I think that's where the conversation kind of like starts. But if you all want to go, like go ahead, like get no judgment.
Those who do want to go, I think you said 15 minutes about 10 minutes ago. So and it's you have a 2-minute opportunity to speak, I think is what he was talking about, and that means you have to sign up. You have to sign up to speak.
But sign up on this sheet first.
But sign up on this sheet, yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah, so if you do want to go, no, yeah.
So occupying ASOSU.
Something Asimov said reminds me of a famous quote by Frederick Douglass. He said, power concedes nothing without a demand. So yeah, ASOSU might be right now the student body government, but if we don't make demands on them to do things, they're not going to do anything. They have no incentive to change. They can easily think like everything's fine. And ASOSU probably does, since they are students involved in it, probably does recognize that there are issues that need to be corrected. But again, the real source of power is not ASOSU. They're kind of given the sheen of power. They don't really have that much authority as it's claimed to be on their website, whatever. It's the top level administrators, it's the board, it's the foundation, and then from there it does go to the state, like the governor. So we need to be making demands on the people at the top that really set the agenda, that really set the tuition dollars, and that really have the authority to do things. I mean, Ed Ray is one person that we should be targeting more than the entire ASOSU student body representative.
Also, I don't know if we said this one yet, but there's the board of trustee meetings next Thursday.
Wednesday.
Thursday, Friday.
Thursday,
Friday. Yeah, and Friday I think it's open, right?
Do you have something to say?
I guess I am more like confused. You had used the idea of like ASOSU is MLK and then we are Malcolm X. And I guess I'm having an internal battle with that. Like, are you talking like violent protest or like non-violent? Can you define that more? Because like personally, like.
Well, yeah, I guess there's a legacy there that maybe confuses it. But what I mean is that there's militancy and then there's compromise. And the difference is, and like I say, MLK and Malcolm X, recognizing that MLK was also very militant too. His legacy has actually been very watered down.
By militant, we don't necessarily mean violent. We mean by militant, can you like explain
Sure, yeah.
that?
So what I mean by that is that you take a demand and you do not change it. Like you do not compromise on that demand. You could accept nothing less than the demand. So that's the militancy. It doesn't mean like militarization of tactics or arming yourself. Maybe it could, but that's not what I'm encouraging us to think of. It means that you are the radical militant voice that will not bend. And then there's the other voices and the other people out there that are willing to negotiate and compromise. And really what it looks like, at least from my perspective, is that in history, it's good to have both. You really need to be as spread and multiple as possible in order to get things to change. And the demand part, Frederick Douglass, he was a militant. He said power concedes nothing without demand, and he was talking about the abolition of slavery. And he was a person that said, the better example maybe is Frederick Douglass and other abolitionists. Frederick Douglass said, nothing less than the abolition of slavery. That is the demand. We have to be militant on that. Other people were saying, let's gradually wait for it to slowly be taken down, and eventually we'll get there and it'll be okay. He said, no, now. We need it now and nothing less. So that's the difference that I'm talking about. Maybe my analogy isn't so great.
Alex, can I just point out that all the tactics you've mentioned are all non-violent tactics?
Yeah.
Right.
Occupation, teach-ins, all non-violent.
Hunger strike.
Yeah, hunger strike.
Maybe that's violence on yourself, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the idea of teaching, especially in like administration buildings, does seem to be like, I guess, the most like irritating like way, in a good way. I mean that in like the most positive term. But I think as far as like it being successful, I think you would need a lot more people that are in this room right now for it to work. So I think that, I mean, if that is like a direction that like we think is suitable in order to meet our demands, then we need to also like think about that and how we can make this like tenfold.
But it's interesting because like you said this before, but last week it was only I think 8 students that went on the hunger strike, and they got, and after I think 10 days, they got $500,000 funding. So I mean, it's really like, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, of course, more people would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think like also like I think what necessitates more people being there is how much more systemic this is than that instance. Like that instance was a closing of a specific thing that had just happened, so they could make a reaction to that that day's events. Where with this, it's like we're making the point of like we have a tradition of administrative pay being too high and students not raising tuition. So
and what it sounds like to me is you're saying is we need a movement.
Can I just say that like they may have been only 10 students going on a hunger strike, but those 10 students all had support groups that were taking care of things for them in their like. So it's, it is you're definitely right. Like it may have only been 10. Let's not. I mean, it's not going to be easy. But it's going to be worth it. Like it has to be.
Dale, it seemed like you had something to say.
Yeah, when you mentioned the Society for the Socially Just University, the meeting that we had last spring, I believe. I was there, and it was a room larger than this, full of people. And these are all people who are necessary for this university to function, very necessary. And I think that when you combine these different tactics all together, then you're able to start creating the kind of attention that you need to start churning a movement forward. And maybe it's not all of us going on a hunger strike, it's 4 or 5, and then some other people have a teach-in or a sit-in and a teach-in at the administration building at the same time, and then that creates a newspaper article, and then it just keeps going.
There's other things too that maybe don't seem as extreme, but there's like mass walkouts. I mean, we saw in Oregon, I think it was a high school, right? They had a mass walkout.
There's been like 4 now.
Yeah,
There's been like 4 high schools.
Oh wow, so it's gotten even bigger. And those are things that we can organize, and those are things that also would probably appeal to a broader set of people. So when you're thinking about tactics, there are tactics that are self-selecting and only appeal to a small group of people, and then there are ones that are more broadly appealing. So, you know, a teach-in that's an occupation type teach-in or a hunger strike, these things are going to be a self-selecting group of people, but you could still have people that participate in them not directly, but like indirectly, or you know, providing support, like you're talking affinity groups type stuff. So, you know, that's just considering like what tactics are available and which ones make most strategic sense.
And anything is better than nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
I just feel like if without influencing the board makeup, what's the point? So, anybody care to counter that?
The board of trustees.
Yeah. Without getting more student representatives, what is the point? Because everything, it seems to stem from their power. So they set the budget, they align the capital improvements, they do the allocation.
Well, I agree with you, but it should be changed, yeah.
How do we make that happen?
Right.
Well, what
What should we
sets
do?
the, like, what document, you know, does it say that, you know, these X positions are able to be on the board of trustees? Like what needs to be altered in order for, you know, there to be more students, I think. Because it can't happen until there is like that systemic change.
Or co-reps. If there's only technically one position, then let's elect 2 or 3 people to share it.
What's the motivation for that ever happening unless there's a mass movement that makes it happen?
Because it's like this, it's probably like this at other universities as well, where there's only one student, one staff, one faculty, like one representative.
Out of a board of 13.
Out of 13. And on our board, we had, I want to say 5 people who were not necessarily CEOs or vice CEOs, but they were in that upper level administration of multi-billion-dollar corporations. So those are the people deciding what our tuition is.
Yeah, it's legislation that sets what the board requirements are and then who appoints them, which is the governor. But like Alex said, it basically takes a letter of recommendation from Ed Ray to get that. I actually have a unique perspective on that. I was in the governor's office when they first set those, and so I was a part of the group that went through that work to find out how many people do we need to appoint and who needs to appoint them. And I was there when Taylor Sarman was selected as the very first student appointee. I'm not sure how that could change, but maybe something with the governor. Kate Brown has been very, I think, progressive so far.
There's been ideas to write up counter recommendations. You know, like Ed Ray will have his, and maybe as like a coalition force, we could write up our own recommendations. Like we want these people on the board. You know, maybe it wouldn't work, but it's something. It's something of a tactic. And the other thing about the board too is that the board is actually very new, like you just said. So their kind of authority over the university and making decisions is still kind of in development. They haven't completely taken over that power. I think they're trying to transition them into like the main authoritative board at campus. But there's a lot of power in the administration, the college deans, these other like top tier administrative positions on campus. And at the moment, they seem to have more authority over how the budget is set. Because the board basically just okays whatever budget gets put in front of them. So that somebody else, probably lots of people before them, like come together and they decide like this is what funding we want, this is what we want, this is how we want the budget to look, and everything's already drafted by the time it gets to the board. So really the process is before the board's even involved, all of this power has kind of been influencing, you know, where the tuition dollars are set. So it kind of complicates things, but what it means is that we can't really just hone in on one specific body of authority. We need to think bigger than that, broader.
Yeah, and I keep thinking back to this.
Don't raise your hand.
Yes.
Just
Sorry, I'm sorry. Who's trying to be
No, you go. Sorry.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
I'll be quick. Going back to like that ASOSU or the ASOSU group in itself, I feel like by making it clear that ASOSU is not representing the students' best interests, by doing that, then essentially I feel like our board of trustees or administration don't have like a fallback plan, because it seems like they have a fallback. They'll say, we have ASOSU. If they were to go through them, then perhaps this change would have been made. But if we make it clear that the students do not support ASOSU because it's not helping them, then there wouldn't really be something they could fall back on, because they're saying, no, you don't, they're not supporting the students. And so if that were tackled, then you would move up and be like, okay, we've made it clear that ASOSU isn't supporting us, so we don't want to go through that. Now we're looking at you to do something about it. And I feel like maybe then there would be like the establishment of another organization, or they would look to reform ASOSU or something like that. But I feel like kind of building up to that point, we would then have more power and leverage over them in terms of kind of bringing that kind of change. That's just
No, but like at the same time, like, you know, we gotta get people aware that they don't like ASU. You know, because people don't even know. You don't even know that they have a governing body, or if they do, they don't know how little they do or how like effective they are. So I think like that's where like, you know, I'm like hearing the idea of the teaching. I actually never heard that until today, but like that also gives the opportunity to teach students around you. Like this is what's going on around you that you might not even know about because you're so busy in school and working your second job to support your education. So I think in a lot of ways, it's like, you're right, it's like, in order to create a counter, we have to get people away too.
I've got two things. First, I suggest that we maybe try to organize a teach-in at the Board of Trustees meeting. That could be, I guess, radical if people are into that, and it could be very, I don't know, provocative, I guess. And then the second thing is, the only problem I have with trying to prove that ASOSU isn't representative of the students, like I completely agree that it's not, but the voter turnout rate went from like 3% to like 12% this year, or maybe it was 7%, I forget.
For ASOSU.
Yeah, for ASOSU. Granted, it's still like ridiculously low, but it grew quite a bit in just a year. So I think that's going to be kind of a difficulty that we have.
Well, I mean, yeah, they were able to tap into more frat houses this year.
Don't raise your hand.
May we symbolically shed these ideals and circle up and break all this room of its intention to get us raise our hands?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alex, I borrowed a book from my sociology instructor.